did that. Which you can, I'm assuming that if you go there, those 3 credits will apply here. I would check with the registrar's office. I don't know all that information yet. But they're doing it. This is going to be at the University of Wisconsin River Falls. They have a smaller shop, but it's going to be run the way classes at like Pilchuck and Haystack are going to run. You'll get demos in the morning, and then you'll have 3 to 4 hours a day to work, and then you'll help somebody for 3 to 4 hours, and you'll just sort of run a whole day. But this is an incredibly cheap option compared to what you would pay to take this kind of class at Penland or Pilchuck or something like that.
What's the class consist of?
The class is Nanda. Nanda's really well known. I've never met Nanda myself, but he's a good friend of Owen's. And Nanda does this thing where he goes to secondhand stores and buys up old production glass, and then picks it up and uses it and alters it to make things out of it. And so the class is going to kind of relate to using recycled materials in the hot shop. And
it's like putting a Sam Adams mug in the
no,
garage.
it's a little more. Go look him up. Nanda Soderberg's not. He's been in American Craft and a bunch of things. He does some really cool stuff. No, he goes and gets like old Depression glass and really funky stuff, and it's interesting. But it might be fun. And I'm sure Owen will do some of his sculpting stuff in the class, regardless of what happens. So that might be really interesting. Owen and I are going to swap at some point in the spring. He's going to come over here, and I'm going to go over there 1 week. So he's going to come and do some demos. He made some pretty cool. He made a pretty cool horse that was there. Also, if you guys have not looked into FOSI, the Minneapolis Center for Glass Art, I think that's what it's called. Yep. If you have not looked into that yet, please do. They have a lot of great opportunities, even for guys at all of you at your different levels. One of which is on November 15th. A local artist, Robinson Scott, who is he? Does anybody know, is he an alumnus from here?
Yeah, no, he's not. But I've been to the studio a few times.
Yeah, he's nearby.
On the Swedish style of glass blowing.
I met him a long time ago, very briefly. But so anyway, so they're going to have a regular artist come about every month to do a public critique of your work, and you can just show up and take your work there. I don't believe there's a charge for that, but he's going to be there for a couple hours talking about people's work. So that might be a good opportunity to go down and introduce yourself. They also have some great small classes. What I mean by that is really short, like one afternoon, 3 or 4 hours. They pick a topic. It's either just passed or it's just coming up, but there's going to be one on like blowing the amphora. So if you really like long neck vases and doing that, they're having somebody who's going to do a special class just about that thing.
Do you know when that is?
I don't. There it is. He's looking at it right now. So anyway, the class, I think if you're a non-member, it's like $25. If you're a member, it's $15. It's something really cheap. But there are going to be a bunch of those kinds of things. One of them is how to work big. Michael Boyd, who's kind of the guy who started the place and the director, is going to do that one in a couple of weeks. So there are a lot of great things like that that you guys might want to consider getting involved in. And Mike is going to come over here at some point, hopefully before the end of this semester, if not early next semester, to talk about FOSI and the opportunities that they have. Because they have what they call like interns or associates, and I think just about anybody can be one who has some glass experience. And if you work 3 hours for the studio, you get a free hour of time. So if you do like three-hour slots, you get a free 3-hour slot.
There's a handful of the local Ramsey students that are there too.
Yeah, there are a number of them. So they're really interested. And when I went over to I really want to start to have a connection to that place with our studio, having artists who work there come over and do demos here, and have you guys start seeing that as an option to working glass and being around people who are doing it professionally. There are a lot of people there who are making a good portion of their living on it, and some really good people doing some great work. So I think you guys should. I'm going to start going over there and hanging out on some nights when I'm just bored instead of playing Call of Duty or something. I'm going to go just see what's happening. So I think that's a really great opportunity, and I'd start looking into that. Okay. One other thing. A very large number of you have found me on Facebook, and I'm just going to state this for everybody. Like, I really appreciate you want to be friends with me, but in my experience, it's best not to be friends with students. So I've just always made that a policy. I like to be able to speak my mind and not have it affect what happens here. When you are no longer a student, I will be happy to have you listen to me rant and rave and post weird pictures of what I do and things like that. My kids in their Halloween costumes and stuff. But until then, it's just across the board. So please don't feel insulted. It's not any one of you. I just don't do it with students. okay? But the minute you leave, I'll leave them on there. Like the minute you leave, I'll go click it, like that. So it'll be there. Okay. What I want to talk about today is the growl and how it's done. It's many forms and iterations and things. And basically, this is the crux of my work is based somewhat on the growl process. It is a process of Swedish origin. I can't tell you exactly when they started doing it. I can't tell you who gave it this guttural sounding name, but it sounds kind of cool when you tell people, what do you make of it? Growl! And I mean, it sounds like you're a Viking, so I mean, what could be better than that? Or a drunk pirate, one of those two. So anyway, the process of a growl is a thing where you make what's called a parison, which can be in basically there are two common shapes. There's one that is made and broken directly off the pipe, which is this type of form for one. And then there's another one where you make an open cup where it's punnied and opened at the top, which is typically this form. There are, yes you may, that one is very thin, but you can, generally they make them thicker. So you're going for one of these two shapes and you're using some type of color either on the outside or inside that you can affect with a sandblaster or a grinding wheel or even like a Dremel tool, something like that, to create a pattern.
And you would grind this for
We'll talk about that in a second. But you can keep holding on to that if you want. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Where was I at? Okay, so you affect it to make some kind of pattern, and in the traditional growl, that parison is then put back in an oven after being cold worked, put back in an oven, heated back up to a temperature like your color bar, where it can be put onto a collar, either just heated up and blown out the way it is, or gathered over to be blown out larger. The images generally do distort and move depending on the type of shape that you want, and that is what gives you the look of a growl. And I do have a slideshow set up of people who both do traditional growls and who do kind of what I call the modified growl, which we'll get to in a second. So methods of creating your image in your parisons. The easiest one, and it's one that anybody in Glass 2 can do, I mean it doesn't take much, but it's just using powders. And what you're going to do is you can do a single color, two colors, by simply rolling in a color early after maybe with your starter bubble or your first gather, you can roll that into one color. Then your second gather, you roll it in another color, and then you blow this parison shape, whichever one that you want to do. And that you can do. And you can also combine these. So you could do a solid color bar on the inside and powders on the outside, which is one of the examples that I'm going to do tonight. Or you could do the reverse. You can put powders on the inside and bar color on the outside. When you know the types of looks that you get from frits or powders, you have to decide which layer it's going to be on. Now the sandblaster is going to do a little bit of distorting that, but hopefully when you heat it up and gather over it, most of that will be smoothed out and you'll see the pattern, whatever it is on the inside. So that's the simplest one. And that's one that pretty much all of you could do easily.
So those pieces that you showed us that you do like that appeared to have more than two colors in them. Was that true? Or?
We'll get to that right here.
Okay.
All right, so the powders are that. The other method is something called a Swedish overlay, which I kind of should have drawn this up here, so I'll quick draw it. The Swedish overlay just put color 1, is you blow a single bubble, and before that you've blown another bubble, which we'll call color 2. This bubble stuck onto the bottom of that one, and then it's turned inside out over this one. And it's a really tricky technique that you use wood jacks for. So I am going to show you this. When you make this, a lot of people think that you make both the bubbles the same size. Do not do that. The bubble that is going to be overlaid should be just over half the size of this one. When it actually gets pushed and opened up and spread down over the back, it stretches a long way. If you make them the same size, you're going to throw half your color into the box when you break it off because it went too far. So you want to be just over half that size. And you'll see it when we do that. But Then cup stuffing, which is largely what I do, that's making simple parasons like this. And for most of the time, if you're going to be using this type of thing, I mean, I put a button right there, and since this is going to be my exterior color and no glass will ever go over it, I generally just leave that on there. So it's going to be the bottom, and it's either going to get cut off and opened up, or it'll be like an extra bit of glass that is there when you go to put your punny on. You know, you put buttons and punny patches, whatever you guys call them here. So I generally just leave them, but you can cold work them off, which Jared was asking. And that really just depends on how you want the bottom to look when you're doing it. Another method I should say, variations on that method. The one that I'm going to show you, and this is one where you can use my box, and hang on a second, pause your video if you're still shooting. I forgot